Okay, we have it?
Yes.
Just one moment. I'm sorry, I'm just having an issue here with the computer. I'm sorry.
It's okay, take your time.
Okay, we're looking at Parashat Balak. Okay, we're ready to go. And we're going to be looking at 2 or 3 Midrashim. Okay, so we need to give a little bit of background before we look at the actual verses, because we need to bring ourselves up to speed. So the Parsha starts with the previous Parsha. Okay, the previous Parsha ends with some victories. Okay, with some victories of some wars that the children of Israel won. And then this week's Parsha starts with Balak. Okay, that's the name of the Parsha, is Balak. He is the king of the Moabites. And he is getting nervous. He sees the Jewish people at the border of his country. And he is afraid that they're going to invade and destroy his country and his people like they did to the other nations. So he goes and he decides to call upon Bilam, who seems to be a person who's he calls upon him in order to curse the Jewish people. Okay, so this seems to be his big plan, to call Bilam. In other places in Tanakh, Bilam is referred to as a kosem, which could best be translated as I wouldn't say magician. Magician is, I'd say a sorcerer. Okay, maybe that would be the right translation. In other places, Bilam is referred to as a sorcerer. And Balak says to him, I need you to come and curse the Jewish people, because I know that whoever you curse will be cursed, and whoever you bless will be blessed. Okay? Then he sends him a group of ministers and dignitaries to tell him to come. And that brings us to verse. Here we go. Verse 8. Okay, verse 8. Actually, no, verse 8. Okay? So he said to them, meaning he said to the ministers of Moab who came to ask him to come and curse the Jewish people. He said to them, spend the night here, and I shall reply to you as the Lord may instruct me. So the Moabite dignitaries stayed with Bilam. Verse 9, this is our verse. Okay, this is the first verse that we will be questioning. God came to Balaam and said, what do these people want of you? Goes on to say, let's continue a little bit, although our main verse is verse 9. Verse 10, Balaam said to God, Balak, son of Tzipor, king of Moab, sent me this message. Here is a people that came out from Egypt and hides the earth from view because there's so many. Come now and curse them for me. Perhaps I can engage them in battle and drive them off. But God said to Balaam, do not go with them. You must not curse the people, for they are blessed. Okay, let's go back to verse 9. God came to Balaam and said, what do these people want of you? Questions? Yes?
This is, I think, a similar question that we asked about Abraham. Who is Bilam that God should come to him just like that?
Excellent.
What?
Yes, go ahead.
No, that's all. That was my question.
Okay. So he's saying, to focus here, your question is, who is this Bilam guy that God is coming to speak to him? Right? We would expect to hear that he's a great person, he's very wise, he's very whatever. Just says, God came to Bilam. Okay, good. Any other questions?
Doesn't he know already who they are and where they came from?
Right. This is no. It's an excellent question, and the Midrash absolutely talks about it. It's actually a fascinating Midrash. I didn't bring it, but the Midrash brings this, and it says something very interesting about it. He says this is a case. This is one of, I think, 3 or 4 examples where like Hashem is like almost doing entrapment, or a case where the question, not entrapment, where the question is the test. He says, because Bilam should have said, well, as you know, meaning Bilam shouldn't have answered as if he's giving God new information. And the Midrash brings at least 2 or 3 other examples of similar cases. For instance, when Hashem says to Cain, very good, yes. He says, where's Hevel, your brother? And he says, I don't know, right? Okay, so good question, but we're not going to see what the Midrash does with it. Yes?
There is another similitude here, the fact that it is in Mitzrayim, that the Pharaoh sees ki ha'am
interesting. Very interesting connection. Very, very interesting connection.
The difficulty with the nations is that we are numerous, but the fact of the matter is that we have 0.0001% of humans.
Right.
But we still do lots of noise. So
right. It's a very, very interesting comparison. I didn't think of that. Okay. I'm going to add a variation to the question, which is, it's not just that we don't know who this Bilam guy is, that suddenly God comes to him. It's the fact that he's not Jewish. And not only is he not Jewish, he turns out he's a bad guy. Meaning, we usually think of a prophet as someone who is wise, just, and it's interesting also, even though we don't know yet that Bilam is a bad guy, okay, we find that out later. But even if, let's say we don't know yet that he's a bad guy, okay, that he's evil, that he, it's interesting. I wouldn't say difficult, but if nothing else, it's interesting that there's this. He seems to be a character of significance, a non-Jewish prophet, and we usually tend to, how should I say this, shy away from the idea of non-Jewish prophets. We spend a lot of time, arguing against the concept of, if I were to be explicit, about the possibility of, of Muhammad or Jesus or other things. We have this kind of, no one ever said explicitly, doesn't say anywhere explicitly that there can't be a prophet from other nations, but over here it's not just that it's kind of saying, oh, by the way, there's this prophet who's from a different nation. He's given an entire parsha, meaning it's actually very interesting. This entire parsha is being told from the perspective of the non-Jewish characters. And this entire story is taking place unbeknown to the Jewish people. Right? This is happening like in the UN. And there are no cameras. Meaning, this is happening. Bilam and Balak are having this international summit about how to get rid of the Jews, or how to rebuff the Jews from conquering the land or from entering. And we're not even part of the picture. And Bilam is this, and God comes to this prophet who's supposed to be battling against us. The whole scene is very, very strange. very, very out of character, where usually the entire story is being told from our perspective. As we are the main character, Moshe is the main character, Avram is the main character, meaning the people, we're the character. And suddenly, Bilam and Balak, not only are they the main characters, but Hashem reveals himself numerous times to this sorcerer prophet, right? So it's not just that Bilam comes out of nowhere. He comes out of nowhere. Okay, yeah, Oleg, you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to ask you, so it looks like, at least from all these sentences, that Bilam has powers that are separate, that of his own. They're not given to him by God. So, and it's
based on what?
So, when he says don't curse them because they're blessed, meaning don't use your powers because I already blessed them, so don't go into conflict with me.
Right. Oh, as if he's saying, listen. Right. He doesn't say to him, you can't.
Yeah, it's like
he says, I'm telling you, you shouldn't, not that you can't.
And he doesn't say that when they first approach him, he doesn't say I won't or whatever. He says, okay, let me see how we can, giving your example, like if it's a UN council, right? Let me go to the council and see how we can divide our areas of influence. So he says he wants to consult and see if he can, if it's okay to curse. It's not so much that he's concerned that he won't be able to perform if it contradicts God's will. He just wants to make sure that he will not get into some sort of trouble if he does that. Right.
Okay, I hear that. It's definitely a possible reading. Meaning. Okay, I hear that. I think that it seems to me that Bilam seems pretty convinced that he can't go. That's the way he portrays it. I can't go unless I get permission from the boss. Now, just because he feels that way doesn't mean that meaning it seems like he attributes his ability to go and curse to God's permission. Right? He says, and if you look in verse 13. Oh, sorry, just a second. Right? Balaam rose in the morning and said to Balak's dignitaries, "Go back to your own country, for the Lord will not let me go with you." And if you look, let's say, a few verses forward, so Balak sends a second group of dignitaries to convince him to come. And then it says, in verse 18, Balaam replied to Balak's officials, "Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything, big or little, contrary to the command of the Lord my God." So over here already, it seems that Bilam understands that his ability comes from God's permission or influence or something like that. But that doesn't mean that everyone around him recognizes that. They might think that he's just being modest or attributing it to some higher force. They think that he has his own powers. But he seems to, that's why he says to them, first thing he says, wait, I have to ask God. So I hear what he's saying. It sounds like a consult. But if you read later on, I think it's more like permission, like he feels he's bound to it. Yes?
But Rabbi Spitz, the entire story is describing a society of liars and corrupts. The society of Balak and Bilam, they are corrupt. Everything goes after the money. And when he hears Balak that Bilam is unable to do what he wants, he says, oh, this is certainly because I'm not paying you enough. I'm going to pay you a little more. So...
Right, because, what, Batya, what is... yes,
the feeling is that Bilam is a liar, great liar also, a great liar.
Why a liar?
Why a liar? Because the first time they come to him, he says, you stay here, and tonight Hashem will tell his word to me. He will tell me what to do. And he knows well, very well, that Hashem will talk to him when Hashem wants, not when he wants.
Well, I don't know. He turned out to be correct. That he said God will come to him, and God came to him. But I wanna go into the Midrash, because we have 3 Midrashim to see. So our question here is, who is Bilam? And ma pitom, God is speaking to him. Okay. And Balak, sorry, wait, I'm looking at the wrong piece of paper. The Midrash says the following. Sorry, let me just find it. Okay, God came to Bilam and said, the Torah says, the rock, perfect is his work, for all of his ways are justice. Hashem did not give the non-Jews an opening to say in the future, you have distanced us. What did Hashem do? Just like he set up kings and sages and prophets for the Jews, he set these up for the non-Jews. Equal opportunity. God is an equal opportunity, employer. He set up Shlomo as a king over the Jews and the entire earth. And he did the same for Nebuchadnezzar. This one built the Bet HaMikdash and said, how many praises and supplications there are. And this one destroyed it and scoffed and said, I will ascend to the heights of the clouds. He gave David riches, and he prepared a house for his name, meaning for God. And he gave Haman riches, and he took an entire nation to be slaughtered. All the greatness that the Jews took, you find that the nations took. Another example, he set up Moshe for the Jews and Bilam for the nations. Understand what the difference is between Jewish prophets and non-Jewish prophets. Jewish prophets exhort the people about their sins. As it says in Ezekiel, and you, son of man, I have appointed you as a watchman. And the prophet from among the nations caused a breach to drive the creations from the world. Meaning Bilam, what he did with his prophecy is try to destroy a nation. And the prophet from among the nation, not only this, but all the prophets had mercy for the Jews and the non-Jews. As Yirmiyahu said, my heart to Moab, as pipes moan. And as Yechezkel said, son of man, lament for Tyre. Tyre is a city. It was a great city in Lebanon. And this cruel one stood up to uproot an entire nation for no reason. Therefore, the verse about Bilam was written to make it known why Hashem took away the Holy Spirit from non-Jews. For this one was from them, and see what he did. Whew. Interesting midrash, right? Okay, so first we have to let's be true to our methodology. Does the Midrash give an answer to our question?
To which question?
Our question was, who is this Bilam guy that suddenly he gets prophecy, or maybe another version of it, ma pitom, what ma pitom that the Torah is telling us about this figure who's this great non-Jewish prophet. And why is the Torah telling us about a non-Jewish prophet? What is the significance of this? Why is it important? And so important that it gets such a big portion. So does the Midrash answer the question?
Partially.
Partially. In what way?
It tells us why Bilam is a prophet, but it doesn't say specifically why Bilam. He could have picked somebody else.
You're right. You're right. It does. You're right. It doesn't tell us why specifically Bilam, but this Midrash at least isn't actually treating Bilam as an individual. Okay, and this is something we're going to see throughout the Midrashim today. He's not treating Bilam as an individual. He's treating Bilam as the representative of all the other nations. Okay, so the Midrash is saying, here, look, Jews have prophets, non-Jews have prophets, and this is the interesting point. The Midrash seems to be saying, and this is interesting, and I have to be a little careful what I say, because this is being recorded. But this Midrash recognizes the concept or the possibility of an actual prophet, a similar concept of a human individual who, in one way or another, in the multiple ways in which we can understand what prophecy is, can have a communication with God, and to the point of understanding what God wants from him or from humans. This Midrash recognizes, although at the same time it also recognizes that possibility, but also comes and says, and that's why prophecy was taken away from the other nations. But still, it's an amazing Midrash which recognizes the theoretical possibility and even the historical possibility of non-Jewish prophets. That in itself is, no, the Midrash has something negative to say about prophecy amongst other nations. Now, so the Midrash is answering the question. Bilam was the opportunity of the nations to experience prophecy, and let's see what they do with it. Jewish prophets use prophecy to try to make the world better. The non-Jewish prophet, right, like the one non-Jewish prophet that the Midrash at least is recognizing, what did he use prophecy for? To try to destroy. Okay? That's basically the idea. That's basically the idea the Midrash is trying to get across. We will soon ask what is difficult about this Midrash, but first thing we always do is the Midrash answering the question? In what way is it answering the question? So yes, it's answering the question. In what way is it answering it? Bilam was given prophecy to give an opportunity to the nations to see how they can deal with prophecy. Answer, they dealt with it poorly by using it to try to destroy. Whereas Jewish prophets, not only do they use it to try to repair the Jewish people, they use it to try to repair the world. Yes, Oleg.
No, but then this is very much open for debate. This is the only place where it talks about other prophets, right? And what do we know about him? That whatever he did, whoever he cursed, whoever he blessed, were cursed or blessed. So it definitely worked. He did not agree to go and curse Jews right away. He said, well, it's not up to me. So we can assume that back, like in other instances where he used his powers, he would do the similar, he would go through the similar process of consulting first and then executing. And so that means there was God's consent to his actions. And in the end, he was told to go with them, but not to curse and bless instead. So how do we go from this to the fact that the prophets of other nations are wicked and use their powers for the worse?
So you're right. Excellent question. I'll divide it into two things. You're right. There's a missing piece from this Midrash. the missing piece from this Midrash is at the end of the Parsha, okay, which we will talk about a little bit as well. At the end of the Parsha, before Bilam leaves, he gives Balak advice about how to beat the Jewish people. Okay? And he gives him the advice, we'll see it later. He tells him the way to destroy them is not by trying to curse them. That obviously didn't work. As you can see, he basically tells him, send your daughters, or send Moabite women to seduce, the Jewish men, and through seducing them, to get them also to basically cross the lines and to worship, basically to sleep with them, to behave in a very not sure what the word is, but inappropriate behavior, inappropriate sexual behavior, which then also led to massive idol worship. And Bilam is the one who understands that the way in which to hurt the Jewish people is to get the Jewish people to sin. You're not going to be able to so much hurt them when they are in a high spiritual state. You will not be able to beat them by war. You will not be able to beat them through some kind of magic or mystic abilities by cursing them or doing these ceremonies. The way to get them is to get them to get themselves. And that is usually when Bilam is referred to as being wicked and eventually actually caught and executed. In the verses themselves, it describes his execution. It's referred to. His execution is referred to, because maybe specifically because his understanding of spiritual life and the relationship with God, and this is not the relationship with. I've many times spoken about the difference between Elohim and Yud Kei Vav Kei, between God of nature and God of history. This is one of my big things which I've mentioned many times. Bilam here is not referring to the God of nature. God of nature, everyone believes in. Like all ancient cultures, all ancient religions, they all believed in Elohim. They all believed in the God of nature as in some superpower, some power above powers, some first cause, okay, or the great wheel, whatever. As I've said before, in Egypt it was called Ra. In Greece it was called, I don't know. Or in Rome it was called, Zeus. Or that was in Greece, whatever. But it's interesting that we see here that Bilam is communicating with Yud Kei Vav Kei, not with Elohim. So Bilam seems to be a great personality. He's a person of stature. And therefore, before he leaves, he's the one who says, you know what? You really want to get them to go against their own culture, get them to go against their own identity, get them to betray their beliefs, betray their morals, betray their whatever. Okay. But I agree with you, Oleg, that it is very easy to read the verses and see that he was okay. But the truth is, if the Midrash goes and picks at it bit by bit to demonstrate that even some of the things that you yourself pointed out, Oleg, if you read them a little bit more critically, because God said to him very, very explicitly the first time, don't go with them, don't curse the people, because they are blessed. He didn't just say, don't go. He gave him, he was very explicit. Don't go with them, don't curse the people, meaning don't go with them, and don't curse them, meaning, and don't think, okay, maybe I can stay here and curse them. No, don't go with them, and don't curse them. And why? Because I'm telling you the fundamental concept. They are blessed. So when the second delegation comes back, Why does Bilam say, "Oh, let me check again"? This reveals something about what he wants. That he's looking for a way. But I actually don't want to go that direction. I don't want to go that route right now. Because I do want to continue and see two other very, very interesting midrashim that connect to what I want to try to do here today, in the little time that we have left. So we see here the Midrash is taking this thing of the prophet versus prophet, but it's expanding it. It says, look, everything that God gave the Jewish people, He's equal opportunity. He gave the Jews a king that ruled the entire world, and He gave the non-Jews a king that controlled the entire world. And it takes King Solomon and Nebuchadnezzar. This has to do with other midrashim that from which the Chachamim learn that Shlomo ruled the whole world, the whole known world. Not getting into whether it's historically accurate or not doesn't make a difference. And another place where in the book of Daniel, where we see there's a reference to Nebuchadnezzar as ruling the entire known world. If we want to get into the history of it, the entire known world could have easily back then been, the Mediterranean and the neighboring countries and a few other areas. Anyhow, the point that the Midrash is trying to make is very clear. It's very simple. That you can't complain that the Jews got prophets, the Jews got ABC, that God is giving preference to them. Because look, also the non-Jews had equal opportunities, and what did the Jews do with it? This is what the non-Jews did with it. Now, I'll ask the question, okay, which is that anyone reading something like this today, I think would feel an immediate discomfort. Because we today are, for better or for worse, feel very uncomfortable with statements that have to do with collective statements about people. Coming and saying, look, the Jews, when they have a king who rules the world, all he does is he spreads wisdom and international relationships like King Solomon, and there's peace in his day. And when the non-Jews have a king who rules the entire world, look what he does. He goes and conquers and kills and destroys. And when the Jews have a prophet, then their prophets, all they want to do is make the world a better place. And when the non-Jews have a prophet, all they want to do is destroy. So this model of national collective statements are ones that I think anyone today finds discomfort with. But in the world of Chazal, as we'll go on to see, it's a very, very obvious kind of concept. Now I want to continue, and now we're going to jump to the story I was talking about before, at the end of the Parsha, when they were sinning with the women of Moab. So that takes us to, just a second. That takes us almost there. Here. That takes us to chapter 25, verse 1.
What chapter?
25.
875.
Okay, everyone got it? Okay.
21.
So I'm going to read it from the translation that I wrote because it's a better translation. It says the following. Israel settled in Shittim And the nation began to commit harlotry with the daughters of the Moabites. Any questions on this?
What did you say? What the question is here?
I'm saying, are there any questions on this? Any difficulties in this verse?
Yes, there is a question. How come that in the same parasha, after all the conflict with Balak and Bilam, and the Bilam being unable to curse Israel, how come that even so, at the end of the parasha, there is an incitation to sin?
Well,
so there is a kind of punishment here for the children of Israel. I'm asking myself, what for?
Well, no, it says what for, because they started sleeping with the Moabite women, and then afterwards they go on to worship idols.
No, but this is like it's like say, oh, it's not our fault. They just became available, and that we couldn't resist. Like, okay, so is it a good way to say if it doesn't say that they were seducing them or that they were giving them some wine or other things to make them lose consciousness and cross the line without full understanding it. No, so they settled, and happened that there were women available, and that's where everything started. So what's the take on this?
Well, no, the Moabites are not being accused here. The Jews are the ones who are killed, meaning the Jewish people are the ones. No one's trying to run away from responsibility. 24,000 of the children of Israel are about to die.
Yeah, and that's precisely the question is how strong is the resolve of Jewish people?
Well, based on what we see right now, not very. Yeah.
What is the importance of indication that Jews settled in Shittim?
Very good. So,
what is it?
Right. Why do we need to? Why is it important to know this? It's saying it as if we know this place, as if we know what Shittim is.
Actually, what is a Shittim?
What?
Atzei Shittim Ondim, it's written. What is Atzei Shittim Ondim?
Atzei Shittim was made...
the Mishkan. Right.
Mishkan.
The wall of the walls or the fences of the Mishkan.
There is some connection?
The Midrash doesn't connect it to that. But I think there's another question.
I think there is a problem here. 1 second. I want to say something short.
Yes.
It is the following. From this pasuk, Vayeshev Israel Vashittim, Vayachel Am Lizmot El Bnot Moab, this is showing that the Jewish people have two fronts, two ways to fail in their purpose, in their divine purpose. One is certainly through force, meaning through power, when they are conquered and so on. And the second is through the spirit.
Right.
Because at this moment, the way to conquer the Jewish people, to submit them, is through the senses, is through harlotry.
Yes.
So,
right. Yes, and that is the role that Bilam played in identifying that the front in which you can attack the Jewish people is not the physical one, rather the spiritual one. But I really want to continue because these two short midrashim, I think, are fantastic for different reasons. So it does seem very clear that this is, like you say, Batya, that this is another front, right? The Moabites tried to they're trying to find a way to battle the Jewish people.
Correct.
Balak said, I can't fight them. They are too great for me. I guess the Jewish people were greater in numbers and stronger. So he's trying to find other ways. Right? That's what he said. At first he calls Bilam, didn't work. And now they're doing it using seduction. So the Midrash says the following. And the nation began to harlot. If you throw a stick up in the air, it will fall back on its source. Okay, the Midrash will explain. The one who began with harlotry is the one who finished with it. And it goes on to explain more. Their mothers started with the lewdness. As it says, the eldest said to the younger, let us give our father wine and lay with him. What is this talking about? Lot. Lot's daughters. And regarding the eldest, it says explicitly, she lay with her father. She who began first with prostitution, her daughters completed it through the prostitution of the daughters of Moab. Now we know that Moab was the son, the original Moab, who is the father of this nation, right? This is the Moabite nation. Their ancestor was named Moab. Moab was the son of Lot and Lot's oldest daughter. Moab was the result of incest. Okay? And that's also why she named him that. She named him Moab. What does the word Moab mean? Me-ab. From father. Right? So back over there in the Midrash over there, Chazal referred to the fact that they criticized her tremendously. That not only did she sleep with her father, right? She intoxicated him and slept with him. She was so unembarrassed that she even named her son after the incestuous act. So the Midrash is saying, oh, you want to know why it is that the daughters of Moab, prostituted themselves in front of the Jewish people? It's in their genes. It's in their genes. Again, this is something that in Chazal's world makes a lot of sense. And again, this is something that we today have difficulty with, but I think it's still valuable to try to understand where Chazal are coming from. And this is an idea, and don't worry, the next Midrash will mellow this a little bit. Only a little bit though. But the concept of national identities and the idea that individual people inherit and live out their lives in the context of a national culture is something which is very, very fundamental in the Torah and Chazal's outlook, both in the positive and the negative. Now, again, we have difficulty with this today for two different reasons, I think. One reason is because it seems, I'll use the word racist, but it's not always necessarily about race. But anything that has to do with attributing to an individual behaviors, characteristics, or personality traits that are not an outcome of their free choice, we see it as too close to bigotry and racism. But I think that we've gone, because we're so scared of bigotry and racism, as we should be, because of the 20th century, we have gone to the opposite extreme of denying any type of collective, of almost denying or being told that there is no such thing as a collective identity at all. That the idea of national identities, I'm not even talking right now about Jewish identity. I'm talking about French national identity, Russian national identity, American national identity. The concept of national identities is something that we see today is being completely dissolved. Whereas Chazal were on the opposite extreme, both for the better and for the worse. The understanding is that if your ancestor, if in your founding event of your nation, there were dramatic events, these dramatic events become part of the cultural DNA. And the truth is, it's not so difficult to accept this concept, on a simple level. You see certain families that have certain characteristics, behavioral characteristics, or cultural leanings that can go through 2-3 generations. So Chazal take it to an extreme and see it as something which runs through, that to some degree individuals of a nation are automatically, by definition, whether they like it or not, whether they realize it or not, are destined to some degree to are stuck with the characteristics of their ancestors or the culture that they were born into. And I think it's something that in the past was very simple and accepted almost by everyone, whereas today we're in the opposite extreme.
What about Ruth?
What about Ruth? So there's two different ways. There's two different ways to answer the question of Ruth. There's the easy way out, which I don't like, and then there's the more logical one. Okay, the easy way out, which is a little bit more mystic, but it's also a lot more apologetic, comes and says, Ruth, and there is an attitude like this in general towards converts, that come and say, converts were always part of the Jewish people. They were always part of the Jewish people. They just happened. Their bodies just happened to be born to the wrong parents. But in their essence, in their spiritual inner identity, they are part of the Jewish collective, and when they convert, they're returning back to their source. I like that answer less. Not because I necessarily disagree with it, but because it seems just too easy a way out of a good question. It seems like a too easy of an answer. What?
Nobody can care.
Yes.
Nobody can care. It's just
the answer I like more. Again, I don't necessarily disagree with my first answer, but I think it's not enough. The answer which I think is a more palpable, rational answer to that is because an individual can change their fate. It's just very, very hard. And the default is that you are bound to the cultural, national context into which you are born. It is possible to go against look, I think it's not so hard to accept. I think even if we had the time, we went around in each one of us, if we thought about it long enough, we'd be able to detect what way of thinking and what morals we have that are a result of the culture, be it the family in which we were born, the state in which we were born, or the nation into which we were born, or the religion into which we were born. But we always like to think that no, everything I do only because I think it's right, and only because I feel it's right. But there are so many factors that we don't recognize and don't realize that contribute type personality, our intellectual leanings, our emotional leanings, our moral sensitivities, and those are determined by and large, according to Chazal, by the cultural, national context into which we are born. But Chazal here, so the answer to Ruth, on a more rational level, is that she was an amazing person who was able to, through tremendous willpower and maybe moral conviction, was able to escape and choose a completely different way of thinking, way of living than the one she was born in. It's not impossible. It's just very unlikely. Okay, I want to...
Ruth is showing that love can certainly conquer what you said.
Yeah, I guess that...
I think.
Okay, just very quickly, the last Midrash, which I feel is very, very important to complete the picture. Because if we were to finish now, we would think that what I'm trying to say is, that we should, kind of pro-Trump style, make America great again, because let's go back to becoming Americans, let's go back to becoming Canadians, let the French be French, let the Germans be Germans, and once we say that, we're in big trouble, right? We can't say that sentence. Because if we were to stop now, it just seems like I'm saying, or the Midrash is saying, listen, there's value in national identities, and you're stuck with national identities, and they are what they are, and that's it. Israel settled in Shittim, and the nation began to commit harlotry with the daughters of the Moabites. So there's another question we didn't notice. It said, Israel settled in Shittim, and the nation, or the people, began to commit harlotry. It should say, Israel settled in Shittim, and they began to commit harlotry. Right? But it's making a differentiation between Israel and the people, or the nation. Says the Midrash, every place it says the nation, again, this is the Jewish people, yes, but it refers to them as Ha'am, the nation. It is a language of, I don't know, how do you read that? Of negative. It's a negative language. And every place it says Israel, it is language of praise. So for instance, and the nation complained, and the nation spoke against God and Moshe, and the nation cried that night, how long this nation provoke me? And Moshe saw the nation that they were wild, and the nation gathered upon Aaron, and similarly all of them. Versus places with the term Israel is referred to where it is in positive contexts. And I think what Chazal are doing here is something I think very, very significant. Which is to come and say, Israel it's saying, if you look at Israel just as another national identity, then they're just another nation. Meaning, I think it's saying that as Jews, it seems a lot of times we're very obsessive about the Jewish people. The chosen people, Jewish nationality, and that is all well and good. But Chazal seem to be saying, don't get stuck thinking of the Jewish people just as another nation. Because if they're just another nation, national identity, then they could also be bad national identities. You could be a Jewish nationalist, meaning if you're going to get obsessed with the Jewish nation, you can turn out to just be another nationalist. No different than any other nationalist. says what we are obsessed about, the Jewish people, is not just because we're a group of people that have a unique identity. Because then the French are a unique nation, the Americans are a unique nation, and even the Germans are a unique nation. And we all know what it looks like when a nation gets obsessed with nationality. And this is saying that's the difference. Let's go back to the first Midrash. Between a Jewish prophet and a non-Jewish prophet. Between Jewish nationality and non-Jewish nationality. A non-Jewish prophet can also do evil things. A Jewish prophet is only looking to do good for the entire world. Jews, non-Jews, and Jewish nationality is not just about Jewish nationality. Jewish nationality is about being Israel, a blessing to the world. Israel is a name which has to do with connection to God. Yashar El, straight to Hashem. I've taken up enough time, but I think the point is trying to make here, and I think it's a significant point when we see the news today and we talk a lot about the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, the Jewish state, not to confuse it with make Israel great again, like make America great again, like God forbid make Germany great again. Don't get confused. When we talk about Jewish nationality, we're talking about a blessing to the world. We're not talking about something which is just self-serving. And that's the distinction. So even though Chazal believed tremendously in national identities and national destinies, it also differentiates significantly between what nationality means to us and what nationality means to other nations, and therefore what we need to be careful about, and what Jewish nationality should mean to us. More than just self-serving. And yes, there is an exclusiveness to it, but that exclusiveness has an international purpose to it. That's it. I'm sorry that today ended up being more of a monologue than a two-way conversation. That usually means I didn't prepare it well enough to make sure that there's enough points to go back and forth. But so I apologize for that. But hopefully it's food for thought, because I think it is very, very relevant in today's international climate and discussion.
Correct. This is so. Yishar Koach. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone have a Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. All the best.